one of the most difficult places on Earth to conquer. With rugged terrain and mountain peaks rising above 8,000 meters. A land that is constantly shifting, where earthquakes can strike at any moment and the landscape cuts off almost every route. Yet the remarkable thing is that people never abandoned this land. They adapted, built their lives here, opened trade routes across the mountains, and turned Nepal into a bridge between South Asia and Tibet for centuries. From there, the first kingdoms emerged, followed by the growth of culture, beliefs, and a civilization with a truly distinct identity. But those mountains did more than lift a land from the floor of the sea. They also determined where the first people could settle. To understand why this place became the center of an entire nation, we need to travel back in time to when Nepal still lay beneath the waters of an ancient ocean. There is something very difficult to believe about Nepal. On cliffs rising more than 8,000 meters above sea level, where nothing remains but ice, snow, and thin air, scientists have still found fossils of creatures that once lived on the floor of the sea. That could only happen if an entire ocean had been transformed into mountains. Around 50 million years ago, this land still lay beneath the ancient Tethys Sea. Over millions of years, sand, mud, and the remains of countless marine creatures slowly accumulated into sedimentary rock layers thousands of meters thick on the ocean floor. Then the Indian tectonic plate drifted northward and collided with the Eurasian continent. Nowhere could absorb the immense force of that collision. The ocean floor was pushed upward, folded, and continued rising until it formed the Himalayas, which are still growing by a few millimeters each year. But those mountains did more than reshape the geological map. They also unintentionally created some of the few places where people could settle. Surrounded by towering mountain walls, the Kathmandu Valley emerged as a broad basin with fertile alluvial soil, a reliable water supply, and a much milder climate than many of the surrounding areas. In a country where most of the landscape consists of steep mountain slopes, it became an ideal place for the first communities to settle and grow. Before long, another advantage gradually became clear. Kathmandu lay directly along the natural corridor linking the plains of India with the Tibetan plateau. Merchants, pilgrims, and Buddhist monks crossing the Himalayas almost all pass through this valley. Goods, beliefs, languages, and artistic traditions from many civilizations began to meet here, gradually turning Kathmandu into the center of power in Nepal. As trade expanded, power became increasingly concentrated in the valley. Nepalese dynasties chose this place as their capital because from Kathmandu they could both control the trade routes across the Himalayas and govern the country's scarce fertile lands. Squares, palaces, and temples gradually appeared, creating the political and religious center of the entire kingdom. But among all those structures, the one held in the highest reverence was not a king, Right in the heart of Kathmandu Durbar Square stands a red brick house with intricately carved wooden windows. It is not guarded by soldiers, nor is it a royal palace. Yet for centuries, even the king had to enter this place to receive a blessing before carrying out his most important ceremonies. This is Kumari Gar, the home of the world's only living goddess. According to the beliefs of the Newar community, the goddess Talaju chooses to manifest herself in a young girl who has not yet reached puberty. From the moment she is chosen, the girl becomes the living embodiment of the goddess and lives almost completely separated from ordinary life. The location of Kumari Gar is far from accidental. Standing at the very center of royal power, it reflects the belief that divine authority and royal authority have always gone hand in hand. During the Indrajatra festival, the Kumari appears on a wooden chariot before thousands of people, bringing blessings to the entire city. Even after the monarchy came to an end, this tradition has continued to be preserved. The people of Kathmandu still visit Kumari Gar as part of their spiritual life, while visitors come to understand why a tradition that has endured for centuries continues to exist in the heart of a modern capital. That faith was not only connected to kings or ceremonies held within the royal palace, it also lives on in the way the people of Nepal bid farewell to their loved ones, a tradition that continues to be preserved to this day. Along the banks of the Bagmati River, cremation ceremonies still take place every day. People believe that the Bagmati carries the soul onward on its journey before joining the Ganges River, the holiest river in Hinduism. That belief gave rise to Pashupatinath Temple. The temple was built on the banks of the Bagmati River and is dedicated to the god Shiva under the name Pashupati, meaning Lord of all living beings. Its location quickly became the spiritual center of Nepal's royal dynasties. The royal family's most important ceremonies, from prayers for the nation's peace and prosperity to the king's religious rituals, were all closely connected to this temple. For the people of Nepal, Pashupatinath is more than a place of worship. It is also where they perform the final rites for their loved ones. On one side are the sound of temple bells and streams of pilgrims, while on the other are the cremation platforms along the riverbank. Life and death exist side by side in the same place, reflecting the Hindu belief that death is not an ending, but simply a transition into another cycle of rebirth. For that reason, Pashupatinath has never been just a religious monument. It remains the most important spiritual center in Nepal, where major festivals such as Mahashivaratri draw hundreds of thousands of devotees and ascetic monks from many parts of the region. Alongside the pilgrims, many visitors also come here to witness a tradition that remains part of everyday life in Kathmandu. Pashupatinath reflects only one half of this country's spiritual life. Just a few kilometers away, another monument tells the story of Buddhism and the merchants who once crossed the Himalayas to connect Nepal with Tibet. The world's highest mountains are often seen as barriers. But in Nepal, those very barriers created the most important routes of all. Amid thousands of kilometers of rocky mountains and snow-covered peaks, only a handful of narrow passes made it possible for people to cross. There were no more than that. Those natural corridors determined how goods, people, and even entire civilizations moved between the Tibetan Plateau and the plains of South Asia. Caravans of yaks followed one another along the edges of snow-covered cliffs, carrying salt, wool, furs, and turquoise from Tibet to the south. In the opposite direction came rice, spices, metals, and handcrafted goods from the plains of India. A single journey often lasted for weeks, crossing mountain passes more than 5,000 meters high, where even one snowstorm could force an entire caravan to stop. As monks, pilgrims, and merchants continued to stop in the Kathmandu Valley, it gradually became the meeting place of the two greatest religious traditions in Asia. Hinduism from the south and Buddhism from the north did not replace one another, but instead existed side by side, creating Nepal's distinctive cultural identity. It was in this setting that Buddhanath gradually became one of the most important Buddhist centers in the Himalayan region. The stupa was built along the route commonly used by traveling caravans, allowing pilgrims to stop and pray before continuing their journey across the mountains. Over the centuries, monasteries gradually appeared around the stupa. By the middle of the 20th century, when many Tibetans crossed the Himalayas into Nepal, they brought with them the tradition of Vajrayana Buddhism, turning this area into the largest Tibetan Buddhist community outside Tibet. Farther to the west, the Kali Gandaki Gorge cuts through the Himalayas, forming one of the deepest natural corridors in the world. For thousands of years, it has served as an important route connecting the Tibetan Plateau with central Nepal. The caravans traveling through this gorge carried more than goods. They also brought languages, customs, and religions, helping shape communities in the northern mountains with a strong Tibetan identity. These mountain corridors carried people, goods, and beliefs across the Himalayas. But those mountains also created something far more valuable. It was the water that began as snow and ice on the highest peaks on Earth, sustaining hundreds of millions of people living south of the Himalayas. When people think of the Himalayas, most picture snow-covered peaks and records of extreme elevation. But the greatest value of this mountain range lies in something that is almost invisible. It is water. Every winter, snow continues to accumulate on Nepal's highest peaks. Over thousands of years, that snow is compressed into massive bodies of ice, forming thousands of glaciers across the Himalayas. When spring and summer arrive, the ice begins to melt, creating the first streams that flow into the valleys before joining together to form the great rivers of South Asia. That is why the Himalayas are often called the Water Tower of Asia. Major river systems such as the Koshi, Gandaki, and Karnali all originate in Nepal before flowing into India and eventually joining the Ganges River. These rivers carry water, sediment, and minerals from the Himalayas, nourishing farmland, supplying fresh water, and sustaining hundreds of millions of people downstream. That means the rainfall, harvests, and daily lives of many communities across the plains of South Asia all begin with the ice lying thousands of meters above sea level on the peaks of Nepal. Nowhere demonstrates that connection more clearly than the Khumbu region. It is home to one of Nepal's largest glacier systems, including the famous Khumbu Glacier, which flows down from the slopes of Mount Everest. This immense mass of ice continues to move slowly down the valley each year, carrying an enormous volume of water that has accumulated over centuries. For scientists, it is a place to study the changing climate. For the Sherpa people, it is part of the sacred mountain that has sustained their community for generations. Yet the very place where that life-giving water begins is also one of the harshest environments on Earth. The first thing that challenges people on Mount Everest is not the snow or the cold, but the air. At an elevation of nearly 5,000 meters, the amount of oxygen is only about half of what it is at sea level. Every step becomes slower, Every breath becomes shorter, and even the simplest tasks turn into a challenge. Yet Sherpa villages had existed on these mountain slopes long before Mount Everest became known to the world. For the Sherpa people, Mount Everest has never been simply the highest mountain on Earth. They call it Chomolungma, meaning the Holy Mother of the world. Before every climbing season, expedition teams take part in the puja ceremony. Prayer flags are raised across the snow and ice. Incense drifts through the cold wind. And monks pray for protection before anyone steps onto the Khumbu Glacier. For the Sherpa people, climbing the mountain is less important than showing respect for the place that has sustained their community for generations. That very mountain is still changing. The collision between the Indian plate and the Eurasian plate has never stopped. Every year, Mount Everest continues to rise by a few millimeters, even as wind, ice, and glaciers constantly wear away its rocky surface. The world's highest peak is therefore not a motionless mass of rock, but part of an ongoing geological process taking place beneath our feet. Mount Everest does not exist in isolation either. The ice surrounding its summit feeds the Khumbu Glacier, which in turn supplies water to the great rivers flowing across Nepal and the plains of South Asia. The mountain is often remembered for the records set by those who have climbed it, but its influence extends far beyond the people who have ever stood on its summit. As the challenge of climbing Mount Everest captured the world's attention, the trails once used by the Sherpa people to carry salt, food, and goods between the valleys gradually became the most famous trekking routes on Earth. Every year, tens of thousands of people hike to Everest Base Camp not only to see the world's highest peak, but also to experience life in a land where nature still determines almost every rule of survival. A mountain range can change the landscape, but the Himalayas also change the climate. As moisture-laden air from the Bay of Bengal moves northward, it meets the Himalayan wall rising nearly 9,000 meters high. Unable to cross it, the moisture is forced upward, where it quickly condenses into rain before falling across the southern slopes of the mountains. This process makes Nepal one of the places with the strongest climate contrasts on Earth. On the southern side of the Himalayas, abundant rainfall nourishes forests, lakes, and valleys that remain green throughout the year. Pokhara is the clearest example of that. Sitting at the foot of the Annapurna Range, the city receives almost all of the moisture carried by the monsoon before it is blocked by the massive mountain walls. Months of rainfall have eroded the rock, creating deep valleys, limestone caves, and the distinctive lake system of the region. Phewah Lake, whose surface reflects Annapurna and Matapuchre, is not only Nepal's most famous lake, but also the direct result of geological and climatic processes that have continued for millions of years. That abundant water has also created land that is far more fertile than many other parts of Nepal. The people living around Pokhara have long relied on farming, fishing, and trade. Today, the city also serves as the gateway to the Annapurna trekking route, attracting hundreds of thousands of visitors each year before they begin one of the world's most famous hiking journeys. But once you cross the Annapurna range, the landscape changes almost completely. Mountain peaks rising above 8,000 meters block most of the moisture from the Indian Ocean before it can move northward. Most of the rainfall falls on the southern slopes of the mountains, while the land beyond lies almost entirely within the rain shadow. Upper Mustang was shaped by that very geographical process. Its location beyond the Himalayas gave Upper Mustang closer ties to the Tibetan Plateau than to the rest of Nepal. For centuries, merchants, monks, and herders traveled continuously along this route, bringing Tibetan Buddhism, language, and the highland way of life to Mustang. The isolation created by the surrounding terrain also helped preserve those traditions to this day. The harsh climate has also shaped the lives of the local people. Villages built from rammed earth, Tibetan Buddhist monasteries, and small fields sustained entirely by glacial meltwater continue to exist in this semi-arid landscape at an elevation of more than 3,000 meters. Tibetan culture has been preserved almost unchanged through generations, making Upper Mustang one of the few places in Nepal where the identity of the ancient Himalayas remains clearly visible. For many years, Upper Mustang remained almost completely isolated from the outside world. That isolation has made it one of the destinations most sought after by travelers looking to discover a completely different side of Nepal, where the landscape, history, and culture have all been shaped by the same mountain range that gave rise to Mount Everest. As rivers flowing from the mountain peaks descend into the lowlands, they create an entirely different ecosystem where rhinoceroses, elephants, and Bengal tigers live side by side. If the Himalayas symbolize ice, snow, and cold, why does Nepal's richest wildlife thrive in the very land created by those mountains? The answer does not lie in the mountains themselves. but in the rivers that begin there. After leaving the mountains, the Koshi, Gandaki, and Karnali carry vast amounts of sediment that build up the Terai Plains in southern Nepal. Fertile soil, abundant water, and a hot, humid climate have created vast forests and grasslands, completely different from the frozen world to the north. That environment became home to the greater one-horned rhinoceros, the Asian elephant, the sloth bear, and the Bengal tiger. It is one of the very few places in the world where these large animals still live together within the same natural ecosystem. To protect this remarkable land, Chitwan National Park was established and later became a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Land that was once the hunting ground of Nepal's royal family has become one of the most important wildlife reserves in Asia. Safaris by jeep or traditional dugout canoe take visitors deep into the wilderness, where greater one-horned rhinoceroses, crocodiles, Asian elephants, and Bengal tigers still survive in their natural habitat. Nature has also shaped the lives of the people. The Tharu people had lived in the Terai long before it became a national park. They built their homes from bamboo and earth, farmed the fertile floodplains, and adapted to the wetlands using knowledge passed down through generations. Tharu culture reflects a way of life that exists alongside nature rather than trying to conquer it. But the Terai nurtured more than forests and wildlife. It was also the birthplace of a man whose teachings crossed the Himalayas and spread throughout Asia. Few would imagine that the birthplace of one of the most influential ideas in human history was not within a powerful empire or a prosperous city, but on a small plain at the foot of the Himalayas. In northern Nepal, towering mountain ranges divide people into countless isolated valleys. But farther south, the landscape suddenly opens into the vast Terai Plains. Rivers that begin in the snow and ice of the Himalayas have carried sediment across this land for millions of years, creating favorable conditions for people to settle, farm, and establish routes connecting with the Ganges River basin. Those routes turned the Terai into a meeting place for many different communities. Merchants carrying salt, spices, and silk traveled across the plains. Sages, monks, and pilgrims also followed these routes, bringing knowledge, beliefs, and new ways of understanding life. Within that flow of people and ideas, one event changed the history of all Asia. Around the 6th century before Christ, Prince Siddhartha Gautama was born in Lumbini. After attaining enlightenment, his teachings spread not through conquest, but by following the footsteps of monks and trading caravans crossing the Himalayas. From Nepal, Buddhism gradually reached Tibet, China, Southeast Asia, and many other lands, becoming one of the world's largest religions. That historic place is still preserved at the Maya Devi Temple. Around the temple, monasteries built by many Buddhist countries stand side by side, each reflecting a different architectural style while honoring the birthplace of the Buddha. The sound of chanting, the steady flow of pilgrims, and the prayer flags make Lumbini more than a historical site, remaining a living place of faith to this day. Today, people come to Lumbini not only to understand where Buddhism began, but also to see how a plain shaped by geography became the starting point of an idea that crossed borders, languages, and time. On that same plane, another story continues to be preserved by millions of people. It is not a story about enlightenment, but about a wedding that took place thousands of years ago. Every year, tens of thousands of people cross the border between Nepal and India just to witness a wedding that none of them has ever attended. For them, it is not a historical reenactment or a cultural festival. It is an event that is still unfolding, passed down from one generation to the next as part of their faith. And that place is Janakpur. The city stands on the Terai Plains, where flat terrain and fertile land allowed large communities to emerge early, along with trade routes connecting Nepal to the Ganges River basin. From there, Janakpur gradually became the center of power for the entire region. According to the Ramayana, this is where Princess Sita was born and where she married Prince Rama. Over thousands of years, that story grew beyond the boundaries of an epic and became a spiritual foundation for millions of Hindus across South Asia. That influence is still present in the rhythm of life in Janakpur. Every year, the Viva Panchami festival reenacts the wedding procession of Rama and Sita. Traditional ceremonies and the sound of prayers ensure that the past is not only remembered, but continues to live in the present. Janakpur is one of the most important Hindu pilgrimage centers in Nepal. For many visitors, the city tells more than a legendary story. It also reveals how a single belief can shape the history, culture, and daily life of an entire region for more than 2,000 years. Perhaps that is why Janakpur preserves more than the memory of a wedding from an ancient epic. It also brings this journey through Nepal to a close with a reminder that, in this land, geography shaped history, while faith has kept that history alive alongside its people for thousands of years. As this journey comes to an end, what people remember most about Nepal may not be Mount Everest or even the towering Himalayas. For tens of millions of years, nature has been quietly shaping this land. The collision of tectonic plates lifted the floor of an ancient sea into the highest mountains on Earth. Snow and ice in the Himalayas feed great rivers. Valleys became places where people settled. Mountain routes connected civilizations. And the Terai Plains witnessed the birth of ideas whose influence reached beyond borders and across time. In Nepal, nature has done more than create landscapes. It has shaped history, culture, and the way people have lived for thousands of years. Perhaps that is why Nepal is more than a land of altitude records. It is the place where the connection between geology, climate, and humanity can be seen more clearly than almost anywhere else, creating one of the most extraordinary landscapes on Earth. Thank you for joining us on this journey. We look forward to seeing you again on our next adventure.